Advancing Kingdom Lifestyle.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of the Gigi Report. Today we are recording this show from an interesting location. I have a very special guest with me on the set, and I welcome you to join us in this amazing conversation. As usual, please, if you're following this conversation online, remember to share with your friends. Remember to share. We are live on Elevate TV Kenya Facebook page and YouTube channel, YouTube page. Please remember to subscribe so that you never miss a conversation of this nature. I'm your host, Godfrey Gichuki, and today I have a special guest on the set, my friend, Dr. Abraham Rugo. Welcome to the show, sir.
Thank you very much. Thank you for coming to IBP.
Oh, very good. Today I actually came to Dr. Rugo's office, place of work, and we want to have this conversation from where he is based, and I hope this provides an interesting environment for us to have this conversation. All right, so we are talking about tax or tyranny, the unpacking of the 2023 financial bill. As you all know, Kenyans are discussing the financial bill since it was tabled in Parliament a few weeks ago. And, it's really picked up heat. A lot of people are very concerned that the current administration is going to tax us to poverty or something like that. I don't know what we are afraid of. We've been paying taxes, but as you all know, when somebody touches the pocket of Kenyans, they come out fighting. So, but I think this is a conversation we need to have. I really think that we need to get, to the very details of it, address some of the key questions that are being raised. And I think we need a technical expert, and I think that's where Dr. Rugo comes in. He's the country manager for International Budget Partnership Kenya. And he's an expert in tax ideas and economics. And Dr. Rugo is in a position to address some of the issues that have been raised by Kenyans. And I believe I want to let him really speak to these matters. And so, as always, the Gigi Report is a platform for big, bold, honest conversation on a broad range of subjects. Like I always say, social, economic, cultural, political, philosophical, theological, but today we are talking about matters economics and some of the social dynamics associated with that. So welcome to the show, and let's get the conversation underway. So Dr. Rugo, let's start by you telling me what you've been up to since the last time you came on the Gigi Report, so we can begin from there.
Oh, good. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and most importantly for the conversation.
Yes.
What have I been up to? Really pretty much the same thing. Analyzing numbers, looking at the conversations happening, looking at the new government, now not too new, new regime of government settling in. Mm-hmm. I think when we last met, it was before the elections last year. Mm-hmm. And since then, we have we engaged with the different political parties that were vying, basically the coalitions that were vying, the Azimio and the Kenya Kwanza. And then finally, Kenya Kwanza has their time in government, and now we've been basically engaging with their promises, looking at what they promised within their manifesto, looking at the kind of decisions they are making. But more importantly, I think it's been a very difficult time because the space we work in has been in a turmoil in every way.
Yes.
Whether you look at it from just the debt obligations angle, whether you look at it from the corruption and public theft of resources angle, whether you look at it from the forex, just how much forex is available for honoring different government obligations. But most importantly, it's also been a very tough time for most Kenyans because coming from COVID season, many still have not recovered in terms of incomes, in terms of jobs. We've not necessarily expanded our economy, in terms of real incomes at household level.
Okay.
So that mixed with just all other things that have been happening globally, all melt down to the kind of analysis we do here. And sometimes you don't even know what to say.
Yes.
You glad you know a couple of things of what's going on, but sometimes you wish you didn't know. Perhaps you'll be more peaceful. Yes, so you've been up to engaging and continuing to provide citizens with information and with analysis that they can use for their own engagement, because we believe that we have a democratic and a democratic right as citizens of this republic to speak to the matters that affect us. And what we are talking about today is one of them.
Democracy requires that there is no taxation without representation.
Correct.
That's what the Americans, argued at the beginning of their republic.
Yeah.
And so I think when it comes to matters of tax, you have to involve the people you're taxing. In modern democracies, if it was, an empire, the king would just order taxes and nobody has any reason to question. But now it is the rule of the people, by the people, for the people. So having said that, clearly, as you describe, the last 2-3 years have been tumultuous across the board, whether you look at it globally or regionally or locally. And Kenya, we've had to have a transition in government, and then the new government comes in at the point where the world is trying to recover from the impact of the COVID-19. So I think that presents a lot of problems. And I think you've mentioned some of the issues. Economies are trying to recover. From where you see, what have you observed in terms of the prospects for economic recovery, maybe globally and regionally and maybe locally? How does that look like?
One of the things that happens within an economy, especially when you have the kind of situations you have of disruptions in supplies, essential supplies. Here, I mean food, medicines, and the like, especially what got disrupted during COVID, and then later the war in Ukraine and Russia, the war in Ukraine with the aggression of Russia. And then the spikes, for instance, in the cost of fuel, the like, is that then the cost of basic commodities goes up, and therefore then you have rising inflation.
Yes.
One of the things that we have observed it as very few countries have managed to contain inflation.
Okay.
In other words, which means that the cost of goods, a basket of goods that people would use on a daily basis, cooking oil, staple foods, and other essentials, basically are just going up.
Yes.
Now, with that, then it has meant that you have a very constrained space. Governments are very constrained because the options you have is either you try and create what we call mass employment or basically mechanisms of ensuring that you have many people being employed, where government then injects money through those people, or you create subsidies. Now, the mix of the two is because either way you're pulling money out of an economy that is not necessarily performing, and trying to put it into the economy, basically to make just the economy functional, and sustain.
Yes.
So inflation still remains very high. A lot of countries now are at a double digit of inflation. And that has got its own implications. Now you add the breaking of supply chains And I think countries that have found it slightly easier to manage are countries that are in a way food secure, so they have quite sufficient food. In a place like Kenya, where you had the tragedy that you still are not food secure, then you have drought. So on top of the crisis of having very little money moving within the economy, then you don't have food, then you have drought.
Yes.
Over a long time. I think one of my observations is that inflation still remains high. In other words, the cost of a basket of goods remains high. With incomes not rising, then it means basically people are losing more the value of their money.
Yeah. Dr. Rugo, I think one of the things that I know that is controversial and has become politicized, like all things get politicized, obviously, the inflation. So I think perhaps you could just clarify a little bit that, like you've described, that the inflationary scenario is actually not just localized. It's not just Kenya. Many countries are actually suffering massive inflation, including the US. But one of the things that have been puzzling me, and maybe perhaps others probably not asking, what's the relationship between the inflationary scenarios and the US dollar, its availability of lack of it? Is there a link?
A good one. A fairly good one and a strong one, I must say, because a lot of world trade transactions are done in the US dollar.
Okay.
This has been something that has been running. It was based on an agreement that was made a couple of years ago to value other currencies based on the value of the US dollar.
Okay.
Which that means is that anytime you have any fluctuation within the US economy, then because for instance, when now inflation goes up, so then the cost of living has gone up in the US, what happens? They're having to spend more dollars in-house than they can be available within. So a lot of people pull in their money or withhold their investments.
Okay.
What that means, and for two reasons. One is either to be able to spend within the US economy, but also for others is holding and waiting for the value to go up so that then they can be able to release. And because then we do our transactions, so for instance, when we buy fuel, until now when we have this government-to-government arrangement where we have committed to pay in Kenya shillings, and we can discuss that later.
Yeah.
Any movement in the US dollar, first in its own value, then means that you also have a significant move. And as I explained earlier, with the falling of the Kenya shilling because again of the increasing cost of goods and services.
Yes.
Basically, then because of that fluctuation, then it means that the US dollar becomes more expensive because it is in shorter supply.
Yes, it's in shorter supply because the Americans are keeping the dollars with themselves, spending it locally, and those who would have invested, obviously outflows,
including remittances.
Yeah, the outflows are declining.
Correct.
And all you need is very, very small percentages to have a ripple effect across the globe.
Yes. So, and because of that, then what you end up having is that because you still pay a lot of our external debt.
Yes.
Is in dollars. Then you have to pay those and all our imports, whatever we are importing today. Even if you imported something from Japan, you still pay in US dollar.
Yes.
So the connection is that this global market is playing in US dollar.
Yes.
But why has that meant a lot is because we still have a lot of expenditure. In other words, we still are buying a lot of goods from outside, and this includes foodstuffs. It includes, as I said, oil, but it also includes cooking oil and other importations that we are making.
And by the way, sorry to interrupt you, because this is where now the political conversation comes in, and maybe where we can understand why the current administration, I have seen like in the current budget, there are proposals to tax a little bit more anything that's coming in as an import. What do you think?
A basic of taxation is that taxation helps you to do a couple of things.
Yes.
The first thing is that taxation helps you to either incentivize or disincentivize. In other words, to encourage or discourage certain forms of expenditure.
Yes.
That's why, for instance, you put a lot of tax on things like alcohol, on cigarettes, and luxury goods.
Yes.
Because basically you're saying those are things that, first of all, behaviorally and the cost of health, you're trying to discourage the consumption of such goods.
Yes.
But you also use it to encourage investors and those who are doing business, or to discourage such informs. So then the encouraging and discouraging, you tax more what is coming out if you want to encourage more local production.
Yes.
So technically, it is counterproductive to impose more taxes on something you do not produce.
Yes.
So for instance, let's take an example. Mobile phones. We do not have, at least to my knowledge, mobile phones that are assembled here in Kenya. A lot of them are assembled from outside.
Yes.
So by imposing very huge taxes on a mobile phone, you do not necessarily build any sector.
Yeah.
But by imposing more tax, for instance, on maize, on imported maize,
Yes.
then you encourage local consumption of the local market.
Local production and consumption.
Yes.
Yes.
If you impose more tax, for instance, on imported clothes, then
Yeah.
you encourage more local production of clothes.
Yes.
That's what taxation does. But reading through the but thirdly is that the tax is also what helps you to actually provide public services and goods and services.
Exactly.
And it's only in the shortfall of taxes plus other levies and rates that then you borrow,
Yes.
because that's what enables you. But finally, it's taxes that helps you even to pay for your debts,
Yes.
and other statutory obligations.
Yes.
So when you read through the finance bill, I think again, as you rightly put it, perhaps not to try and interrogate the motive, but sometimes I struggle to understand the motive of the current government in terms of the kind of policies, in terms of the kind of proposal, because what you see here is an omnibus of proposals, which is what the finance bill normally does.
Yes.
But without a clarity perhaps on how much more you're likely to collect
Okay.
and how much more you're likely to lose.
Okay.
Let me give an example.
Yes.
So for instance, you impose a tax, an extra 8% tax on petrol.
Yes.
You see, that tax is not only an 8% on petrol, because petrol and other fuel products basically have a multiplier effect in terms
Yes.
of transport, in terms of production of certain goods, even in terms of, for say, things like posho meal, which run on diesel, especially in the villages.
Yes.
In other words, what you're saying is, whereas the tax you have introduced is on fuel, goods and prices, what you have done, you have actually increased the cost of production across board.
Yes. Yes.
You get it?
Yes. Yeah.
So one way what you're saying is that perhaps, first of all, you are disincentivizing, and there's no surety that you will collect that extra money.
Yeah, by the way, yes.
For instance, let me give you an example. In 2019 or thereabout, there was an increase of about 10% excise duty, excise tax on data and calls.
Yes.
And within that 1 year, tax that had been collected from that particular line of 32 billion dropped to 25 billion.
Okay.
So we basically lost about 8 billion because of increasing tax. Because, as I said, consumption, you affect consumption.
Yes.
And consumption shifts to another line.
Yes.
So I do not see, whereas I see an effort to try and collect more and be able, and it gives you about 50 billion. Two, you have increase, for instance, of withholding tax on digital content creation.
Yes.
This is still a nascent space that is still growing.
It's actually growing. It's only emerging. I mean, really, there's very little money in that. I mean, there are just a few people making that money. Anyway.
Precisely. So my sense is that then you don't get some sense of a policy coherent decision around why this. And remember, there's what you have in the finance bill, the tax proposals.
Yes.
Including the housing fund, which I don't think is that it should be a tax and should be mandatory anyway.
Yeah.
But that's a discussion for another day. But then at the same time, you also have increased the contributions on NHIF, on NSSF, including how much people contribute if they are not employed. Initially, it was 500. Now it's been raised to 1,000.
Oh, is it?
Remember, all these things have a compounding effect because it's the same pocket.
I think there's the
same pocket where all this money is coming from.
Okay. So that presents a big problem. And like we are saying, taxes of necessity have kind of it cuts both ways. There are things it incentivizes and other things it discourages.
Correct.
So like you are describing, and then even the intended volumes, say for example, how much you're going to collect. We can even take the NHIF, although it's not in the bill exactly, but it's on the side. If you're requiring everybody to pay 1,000 shillings, and that's include my own dad who is in his 90s, for him to sustain that NHIF, facility, which actually does help a lot.
Correct.
The older people. That has huge implications.
No, it has huge implications. And as I said, the bigger conversation around this whole bill, and why is it causing an uproar? It is not, I don't think Kenyans are angry because of the proposals in and of themselves.
Yes.
It's because there's no commensurate assurance, at least not from experience, that the services for which are being claimed for will be provided.
Okay.
We tax to be able to provide public services.
Yes.
If those public services are not being provided, including, and importantly, by the way, let us remember that the tax that we collect has been growing.
Yes.
And different taxes have been adjusted from time to time.
Yes.
And tax has been growing, at least on a 14, say for 2020, 2021, when we had COVID time, taxes have actually been growing year on year. We've been moving from one number to another. 1.5 trillion, 1.7 to 1.7, to 1.8, and our target this year is 2.1 trillion. So in terms of the amount of money we target to collect, we've been raising it. And the president is on record saying, in fact, I want to raise it now, according to the current proposal, is to raise it by another 400 billion to 2.5 trillion, as it were. The question is, are we seeing and experiencing the commensurate amount of services?
Yes.
So that then, because if you're asking me to pay more, then I should be getting more.
Yes.
In every way. I should be getting more, or at least I should be getting the same of the services. So I should be able to walk into a health facility and be able to get public health services. Right now, you walk into a health facility, chances are that you will not find, if you find the nurse, there are no drugs, and there's been a public outcry.
Right.
You think about security, you still have to hire your own security, in your estate and whatever. Water is also still a challenge. So when citizens have education, when citizens have to provide for themselves the same public goods and services that the government is supposed to provide with taxes, then those citizens have a right to ask, why am I paying taxes?
That's true. By the way, I've never thought that maybe there's a way, instead of me hiring, instead of where I live, for example, us hiring a guard at the gate, I've never thought that perhaps actually that's government work.
It's government work. It's government work.
I should be leaving my gate open without expecting my car to be
I have lived in countries where there is no even fences and gates.
Yes.
And you can walk on the streets safe.
Yes.
Because security is not a good you can provide privately to the public.
Yes.
In other words, you cannot just out of your good heart say, I'm responsible now for the security of all the people in my estate.
Yes.
No. That's why we give that kind of service. That's why it's a public good. It's a public good because then your consumption of that good and service does not deny your neighbor the consumption of the same. So a police officer does not just serve specific people, he serves everybody in that kind of so I find that the discussion on tax and these tax proposals in the finance bill have to be curated from two angles. The first angle is, what is a promise that service delivery will improve?
Okay. Two,
it is what is being done to improve our incomes, because you see, tax is a factor of incomes. If you have no income, there's nothing to tax.
Yes.
Whatever way you look at it.
Yes.
So if you say, if I don't see effort and serious effort towards employment creation, towards income improvements. And what I see is more a deepening of those incomes that are already there. Then it becomes very, very concerning. But perhaps an overarching one is to say, but what are we doing to make sure that government is more efficient, is spending better? I did some math yesterday, and it occurred to me that the amount of money the government would make by dealing with corruption, wastage, theft, and all manner of misuse of public funds is far much more than what it will collect by increasing taxes by new targets. Because you're talking of about 700 billion of what you will gain by dealing with corruption and wastage in the year versus 400 billion that you will get by increasing the level of taxation.
Absolutely. And of course, and it's politically even harder to persuade people to give you an extra 400 billion. And in fact, to be fair, those of you that are following this conversation, you know, as I'm sure you're following what we're discussing. To be fair, if the public was persuaded that efficiency, you know, and a reduction in wastage, for example, say like even if we knocked that figure down to by the 400, you know, extra expected income, or even 300 or even 100 billion rather, I think there would be it would be easier to sell that than to sell the idea that, look, you guys, you know, you have to pay extra to get to keep us going. Plus, of course, some of the other hidden problems is, and I don't know what you think about this, a government which actually increased, brought in the extra staff, you know, the CAS. I mean, there are 50 people. We know overall they are not going to consume more than 400. I think we were told annually they consume how much? 400 million annually. So it's really a tiny portion. It's way small, tiny portion. But politically, people are very unhappy with that one.
Yeah, because you see, in Kenya, government positions are not just positions. They come with expectations to your community, to the projects you take to your community. So the total cost of maintaining that CAS is far way above, you know,
the actual salary.
The salary is not even the biggest issue. You know, it's the allowances that accompany. That's why SRC has been on the headlines saying, guys, if we just address, for instance, allowance. So any additional senior government official you introduce, you basically are saying, if you took a look at their basic salary, you're saying you're introducing another, at a minimum, 2 times what is their basic salary because of the allowances, the vehicles. But then they also are expected to deliver projects to their villages and to do other things and to participate in other activities. Remember, majority of them are politicians, so they are using this as a stepping stone to the next election, basically as a holding gap. Waiting for the next election, and therefore they need to be seen to be doing something on the ground that costs. And that is the kind of rent seeking that we are saying that is causing us this wastage. This wastage is not money getting lost in a certain, you know, in an unknown system. You know, it's money that is getting lost in the hands of people because government is in the hands of people.
Absolutely. I'll hold you there. Rent sinking. So, ladies and gentlemen, as you follow this conversation, we are talking about tax or tyranny. And you know all the challenges associated with the current finance bill, and we're going to take a short break. When we come back to this part of the conversation, we're talking about government being accused of being rent seeking, and you know all these officers, the additional officers, and other challenges that are associated with the proposed budget proposition. So we take a short break, and then we come back to this conversation. So don't go away, keep it Elevate TV. We continue with this conversation.
chapter 18, verse 12 to 14. It's about the lost sheep.
God is happy when a sinner becomes a believer.
What did the man do?
He left the 99 sheep and went to look for the one lost sheep.
Just like that person who left the other sheep and went to look for that one sheep that was lost, that is what you are going to do. God desires that all of us belong to Him.
All right, welcome back. This is the Gigi Report. We are talking about tax and tyranny and asking the big question whether the current government administration is actually maybe just exploiting us. Are they creating a kind of a tyranny? And we are unpacking the finance bill, the current bill, which is before Parliament. Remember, the requirement is that the bill needs to be subjected to public what do you call it? Public
Participation.
Participation.
Yeah.
And so the conversation that Kenyans are having is actually in keeping with that spirit of public participation. So it is in order for us to just rip apart the whole bill and just reject it if we must. But ultimately, of course, the current administration hopes that we can allow them to proceed with the proposal they have placed before Parliament. And so we are trying to unpack that. So, Dr. Rugo, before we went to a break, we were talking about the whole idea of, for example, as the government is trying to persuade Kenyans, to allow it to tax a little more so that they can improve the revenue collections. So then there is the challenge of how do you sell higher taxes to a public which feels like even those state officers, and especially particularly, for example, the position that is kind of like contested, the CAS, county assistant, cabinet assistant secretaries,
yeah.
For those who are probably not familiar with our political systems. So the idea that the current administration has admitted extra 50 very senior officers into its administration, and the public's reaction generally has been, no, I think that's too much extra cost. And then what you raised, the whole idea of rent seeking in the public service space. So I want you to speak to that, and how will this administration really persuade people that it means it has good intentions for the public, and do you think that their proposals will succeed given that particular small challenge?
No, I think one is to appreciate that this administration or regime, as has been said, of government comes and is almost playing by the political playbook. The political playbook that we have written is that and allowed ourselves as a society is that one, politics is a means to making wealth.
Okay.
It's a means to making money. And we see that just in terms of just how many politicians who come in barely finding their way around. And now later they are the ones talking of the amount of money and property that they own. From MCAs, governors, MPs, So because of that, then tied to that is a political cost of campaigns, where the cost of campaigns is far way beyond what you will make in your 5 years.
Yeah, by the way, that's a very serious,
it's a very serious
reality.
matter. So, for instance, if you work out a governor who on a good day will earn, say, 1.2 million in a month, plus allowances, if you think about in a year, that governor will make perhaps 14.4
million.
14.4 million, even make it 15 million.
Yes.
Multiply that by 5, he will make 75 million.
Okay.
In the time of the
in the space of 5 years.
5 years.
Yes.
but the campaign costed 200 million.
Okay.
So where is he supposed to get the extra 125?
The guy is on deficit already.
Yes. So because of that cost, then therefore, as soon as people get into, then of course because of that prestige and almost an express route of making money out of the public purse, then whether it's through tender, whether it's through outright, theft or inflated allowances and what have you.
Yeah.
We've had situations where even Parliament has had to recollect mileage that was SRC gave us, I think, a report of mileage claims that were fictitious, and therefore they had to be reclaimed back from salaries.
Yes. Yes.
Of members of Parliament, running into a couple millions.
Yes.
What am I saying? Because of that kind of a nature, then politicians and individuals, the political office has become the aspirational place of many.
Okay.
Not necessarily to provide public services. Is to go and be in charge of the millions in CDF money, for instance. Because if service delivery was the goal, then many would argue, let's think of the most efficient way. Let's strengthen counties. Let's strengthen the accountability of counties to be able to. So because of that, then it means, is what explains what this figure that keeps floating around of the billions that get lost in a day.
Yeah, the 2 billion, the 2 billion number,
Yeah, and how they get distributed. And therefore, those become the money either the government, the executive uses to, when you hear them saying that this thing will pass. I'm not too sure the convincing will be by word of mouth.
Right.
It will be perhaps by other means, including cash.
Okay.
So what am I saying? You have a situation where, there's one other third aspect. Is that also because of the nature of that kind of politics, the moment somebody vies and becomes a politician, it's like they have signed a career death penalty.
Okay.
When they come out here, nobody else will give them a job. So they have to stick their neck out.
Okay.
And remain in the political space, either working within a political party. And that's why you see, it's 50 CASs, but I'm not surprised that the people who are expecting to be appointed will run into hundreds.
By the way, I think that is something that, and I like those of you, our viewers that are following this conversation, we probably need to understand that politicians is a class of Kenyans that have their own life. So once you become a politician, and I think that's a very important thing for Kenyans to understand, that politicians, basically, it's like a do or die scenario.
It's a do or die.
Once you jump into that bandwagon.
And the same citizens who call you names and shout you down when you don't win, when they don't vote you back in, are the same ones who, when you're in office, line up in your house every morning. So a lot of politicians have argued the reason why we need more money is because, you see, we are running a welfare system. The fact is that any salaried Kenyan runs a welfare system.
That's true. And an MP, the more.
Nobody adds more money to us. We still are paying school fees for other children. We are in fundraisers for medical bills and all manner of things. The point I'm trying to say is that we have created the optimal conditions for the desire to steal from the public coffer.
That is something that needs to be said. I think we need to have this conversation at that level, so that then we can say, look, even corruption in of itself, it is an outcome of an underlying infrastructure and substructure, both in terms of the way we do our politics, the way we structure our society. So it's like, it is just almost impossible, the expectation placed on any one individual, especially in the public space, that the pressure is too much.
In fact, the most unpopular, unfortunately, sometimes some of the most unpopular politicians are politicians who do not dish money out.
All right.
I know politicians who have lost their seats simply because they chose to provide services. They chose to focus on ensuring that services are being provided. But they were not sending money they were not present in funerals.
Yes.
They were not present in all these manner of, kind of engagements. But let's push the conversation forward. So the point I'm saying is that then the discussion around why then it becomes very difficult to reduce our expenditure is because almost every project, every initiative, there is a politician who is not only a politician, but there's a set of people, whether that politician is working with 10, people who are running certain projects and what have you, or they also need to be seen to be working, because it's not all bad in a certain area. So the needs of the society are many.
Yes.
When you add just all the amounts that are getting, that explains that elasticity.
Yes.
The fact that it's not possible to reduce how much government is spending. But those are some of the things that are critical in this finance bill conversation.
Absolutely.
It cannot just be about raising more. Why can it not be about cutting?
And by the way, actually, I was going to raise that. Maybe looking at the future, for example, one of the questions that keeps getting asked, is the country moving in the right direction? Are we expecting, what's the future like? So, and I think often you have a poll which kind of almost always says the country is heading in the wrong direction. Is there a reason for optimism about the way our politicians and our governments are running, our economy? And what exactly are we getting wrong? Other than, of course, fighting about the tax, what should be taxed, what should not be taxed, and stuff like that.
I think what we are getting wrong, in my opinion, is that we are imagining that you can grow the economy and at the same time reap everything out of it.
Okay.
One has to give way. You have to first let the calf grow to a point where it can be milked. You cannot grow it and milk it at the same time.
Yes.
You've got to make a choice.
Yes.
And this cuts across board. Both politicians need to be honest, and government leaders need to be honest and realistic on what is achievable. Okay. And they need also to convince us as our leaders and as the people they are leading on what is practical. So in terms of, I see that there's need for Kenyans to be practical. And there's a reason why Kenyans are perhaps asking for everything, because they are like, I don't know about tomorrow. Let me get my health services today. And even when it comes to, campaigns, again, back to campaigns, the discussion we were having earlier, where people say, I do not know, I've had a politician, a friend of mine was telling me that, you go to the ground as you're campaigning, people say, what you have said is amazing. You will like your ideas.
Yes.
But we don't know about tomorrow.
Yes.
So when you get there, you go do those things you have said.
Yes.
But right now, sort us out. As of now, let us clear our business. Tumalizane hapa, nobody knows about the future.
Yeah, macho.
But should you get there, those things you have said, you do them.
Yes.
We are waiting, and we will be happy if you do them.
Okay.
But why don't we address now? Which tells you the desperation is real. And some of these things, by the way, I think it is wrong for us to accuse people sometimes of even asking for money. Because it's a choice between livelihoods and death.
The current government, in my own view, sounds like very positive, and maybe I'm biased. People will think that guy belongs to Kenya Kwanza. That's why he's speaking positively about the government. I think that's not the point, actually. I think it's a greater point of how do we get to the place where we will have trust in government.
Kenyans have a right to be very cautious.
Yes.
If I use the word cautiously optimistic.
Yes.
To try and manage their hopes, because their expectations have been dashed. Before.
Okay. Yes.
When you think about how we started with 2003 with Mwai Kibaki.
Yes.
The expectations were very high.
Absolutely.
I remember.
Sky high.
I remember. It must have been 2003 or 2004. Kenya was ranked among the most hopeful nations in the world.
Yes.
People were expectant. People saw the possibility. Then before long, their hopes started being dashed.
Right.
And there's been documentation of the things that happened, corruption, scandals, and a lot of things didn't quite go well. So that by the time you get to 2007 and 2008, and people now, it is all out to fight, and there's bloodshed because of campaigns and who needs to win these elections and what have you. Kenyans became very concerned and realized, hiya, by the way, we actually can lose our country. Mm-hmm. And I feel like a huge turn took place at that point of saying these politicians don't care. Right. We are on our own.
Yes.
Whether our children die or live, it's our responsibility.
Yes.
They are not in this.
Okay.
And therefore, that's why you get a sense in the fact that many people are not, they're not surprised that the government is corrupt. They will actually be surprised if it works. Because they are so used to it not functioning. Okay. Mm-hmm. But you see, that's a surprise that I think this government can pull, especially for a government that has got such a fair support base.
Yes.
Because even if you look at the elections, give and take, there was almost a 50-50% to either side.
Yeah.
So when you have a very strong opposition, which is supposed then to be keeping you checked, if at all they take their responsibility seriously, and you have a support base that is as good,
as robust and as reasonable,
then that gives you the perfect condition for delivering for the Kenyans, because Kenyans still expect their lives will improve. That's why they are working harder.
Their expectations are high.
The expectations are there.
Yeah.
But what I need to say is that then government has no option but to deliver.
Absolutely.
But the reason for caution is because we've been there before. Our hopes have been dashed.
Yes.
So we know, and we don't want to put all our hopes on politicians. We have changed politicians. There are counties where we have swept everybody, from governor to MCA plus MP and senator. And they have come in and they have done exactly, it's like they were following the script of the previous one.
Yes.
They've done exactly what the others did, and they have cared about themselves. So that for me, and earlier you had asked me, so what then should this government do? Mm-hmm. For me, I think you must go incrementally. You cannot have it all.
Okay.
You must go incrementally. Do you want to collect revenues from the digital and the creative economy? Build that economy first.
Yes.
Do you want to collect from agriculture and agriculture products? Build that economy. That. Do you want to collect from manufacturing and what have you? Build it. So that then it does not become a burden of a few who then now you have to appeal from an emotional, almost a spiritual kind of argument that you guys, why can't you care for your
nation?
For your nation. Why don't you want to give, so that we build houses for your brothers and sisters? And then you get asked the same question of, so why should I? If you don't care, why should I care?
Absolutely. And I like what you're raising. So actually even the misgivings about, for example, the housing fund, which I checked clearly, the document, the proposal is actually saying this is an reintroduction of this fund. It was tried out in 2018 and it flopped. It was, it was rejected and it had to be shelved. So I think this government is very courageous. It's brought back this very toxic idea. And hopefully, even if they got it right, they really will be under so much pressure to prove that they mean well.
Yeah, because you see, first of all, there's no proof of concept.
Yes.
In the sense that, you see, housing is a critical driver of the quality of life that people live.
Yes.
But I think we need to qualify that the big challenge we are trying to deal with is the fact that Kenyans are moving from rural areas to urban areas.
Yes.
Question we need to ask, why are they moving from rural areas where they own their homes and coming to the urban areas where they have no homes?
That's a very big challenge. Yes.
Two, what is the gap we are trying to address with this social housing and affordable housing? And why should government be the one to meet it? Let me give you an example.
Yeah.
in Parliament, if I'm not wrong, there is a proposal to make the retirement schemes, pension schemes that we contribute to, serve as a collateral for mortgage.
Okay.
Because it's assured money. You contribute every month, including the ones of NSSF.
Yes.
Why don't you use them? So that then, as somebody contributes, they are also gaining, and they are able to hire and build for themselves the kind of house they want. And by the way, remember, this is largely an urban issue.
Yes. Yes. By the way, and
this is largely an urban issue because that's where you have about 2 out of every 10 households.
Yes.
Owning the home they live in.
Yes.
But you see, not everybody also wants to own a home.
Actually, by the way, you've asked, I think, 3 different
But they want to live conveniently, because the places where you want to live conveniently, which is near your workplace and what have you, happen to be the places you cannot afford to own.
Absolutely. And I like the fact that you're asking many questions, and those are the questions, and one of them is, why government?
Yeah.
Because and I think that's a question I think a lot of people, they might not be asking, because why not work it in such a way that the government is actually not involved in that affair?
Because if government is self-declared wasteful, why should I trust it with my money?
Absolutely.
To build for me a house, which I could have achieved perhaps with much less money.
Absolutely. Dr. Rugo, now that is very interesting. Ladies and gentlemen, I know we have very little time remaining in this conversation, but that's a very big question. The government has self-declared itself that it's wasteful, and now it's promising it's going to improve. It's going to repent of its past not very good ways, and then come back and be righteous and be gentle. And that's present a very serious moral case for why Kenyans are actually very, they have reason not to be optimistic about that. But before we run out of time, there is still this little bit I really would like you to address it, especially from where you sit, the public debt. Okay, it's still a nagging issue.
Yeah.
Do you think that this particular budget, finance bill, would really have a positive impact on? Of course, the most important thing is reduce it. Is it going to address the public debt issue, and what from where you sit and what you see in those numbers?
So I mean, you see, your public debt grows if your expenditure is growing faster than your revenues. That's
Okay.
the only way public debt. So basically, it means that every month, even at a personal level, your income is not improving, but your spending is improving. So last month you spent 150, you're earning 100. Next month you spend 200 shillings, you're still at 100, and even if you have improved, you're at 120. Your deficit has moved from 50 shillings to 80 shillings.
Yes.
Then the next month, as long as our expenditure is growing faster than our income as a country,
Yes.
we are going to be in a debt situation, because we have to borrow for that money. But let's appreciate also that a lot of the debts that this government has to deal with in this coming financial year. So, and what numbers are we talking about? So the government has to pay the total amount of debt. They are planning to raise about 2.5 trillion. Let's say they are planning to raise about 25 shillings.
Yes.
The amount of money that they will go to debt is 1.6 trillion.
Okay.
1.6 trillion basically means that they are left with just about 900 billion to provide public services. Their total budget is 3.6 trillion.
Okay.
So if you remove 1.6 from 3.6, it gives you 2
billion.
2 trillion, sorry. It's because it's a trillion.
trillion,
Yeah.
yes.
So it's basically, if you remove 16 from 36. So 16 is how much will go to debt repayment.
Yes.
And that's a must.
Yes.
What I'm trying to explain is that what we are dealing with in terms of public debt now has nothing to do with our decisions right now.
Okay.
It has to do with our decisions in the past.
Okay.
I'm unable to buy the argument that the current president just found this situation. He was the deputy president.
Okay.
For all purposes and intents.
Yeah.
We don't know at what point they parted ways, but at least we know for the entire 10 years he was the deputy. So he knows what was coming. So we are dealing with the legacy problems, just to, even if it is to exonerate this current regime.
Yes. Yeah, they have a legacy.
We are
challenge.
dealing with a legacy problem. We have 240 billion of the amount I have just talked about that we have to pay for Eurobond, for instance, that is maturing. So already, because of what I've just explained, so you are left with, so out of 36, you minus 16, you are left with 20. Out of this 20, 10 is the only amount that you are, or 10 thereabout is the amount that you are hopeful. So unless we make decisions on cutting our expenditure, which is what he had promised, remember the 300 billion, and unless we are managing our expenditure, the next couple of years are going to be very rough. Or unless, as some people have proposed, we just decide we declare bankruptcy. We say we are unable to honor our obligations. Tukutane mbele.
And we tell the Europeans we can't pay them.
Well, actually, let me give you a surprise. Actually, I don't think our biggest problem is out there. Our biggest problem is in-house.
By the way,
it's our domestic borrowing. Because that's where we have the highest interest rate.
Yes.
And that's where we have the shortest maturing periods.
Okay.
So tough decisions have to be made, and I hope they will be made, and they need to be balanced, which I think is, as we wrap this up, decisions have to be made appreciating the current of times we are in.
Yes.
So that you cannot continue knowing very well incomes are not improving, the economy is not performing the way it is supposed to perform, then you want to extract more. For me, I feel there needs to be empathy, there needs to be grace, and any increase in taxes, an increase in any other fees or charges needs, first of all, to be not only incremental, but also needs to be matched with showing that we are dealing with wastage and theft, but also we are also committing to provide the public services that we have promised you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Rugo, for an amazing conversation, very wonderful insights, and speaking to the issues, the dynamics that are there, the numbers. At least now, our viewers have an idea about how the numbers sit, and the dynamics and the political decisions and the tough issues that are, the socio-political issues that are surrounding this whole conversation. All right, so we got to bring this to a close. Thank you very, very much indeed for staying tuned in. This is the Gigi Report. I'm your host, Godfrey Gichuki, and I hope that you've learned, you have, enjoyed the conversation, and you can then respond in kind and get to participate in these conversations out there in the public. So that's all we had for you today. We'll see you another time. Keep it Elevate TV, and thank you very much for watching. God bless you. Bye for now. Amen.